Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Schmid, Deloitte Digital's Chief IoT Technologist, also known as Mr. IoT. This week on Coffee with Mr. IoT, my co-host Rachel Mohrmann and I are talking with Jonathan Fox. Jonathan is a leader in our Deloitte digital practice who focuses on digital strategy and innovation. We want to talk to Jonathan today about not where IoT is going tomorrow, next month, or next year, but where is he going to go for the next 5 years. Jonathan, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, Robert. Nice to speak with you. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I have to notice how we all have a very bland background today, except you have orange and I have gray.
Yes.
It's funky. But in any case, it's fun to have you here. I'm doing good, and I'm really excited to hear you talk to us and talk about the inflection point of IoT. What is that? What do you mean by that?
Well, first, before I go into that, I do want to say that, yes, you do have a great background, but your the foreground is very, very colorful, so I do appreciate that.
That's pretty normal for Robert. I don't think one of these shows without some sort of loud outfit going. That's his.
Call it colorful, please.
Yes, but to answer your question, for me, I think we're starting to enter a very interesting point in the discussion around IoT. My conversations with clients over the last couple of years have often used the terminology, the art of the possible. I see a little bit of fatigue around that topic, or that at least that language, because people really want to move beyond the art of the possible. They actually want to start to implement and pilot and test. And in the space that I do a lot of my work, which is healthcare, people are very interested, but also very careful and cautious about where they do this because of the regulatory environment. So for me, that inflection point is really largely about when, how and when do we move beyond the art of the possible and move through even some of this early piloting and testing and get to, larger scale with regards to some of the opportunities that may be on the table.
It's interesting, we have this theme in IoT. We call it think big, start small, scale fast.
Yep.
And I think when I relate this back to what you just said, is there was think big is the art of the possible, the start small is the piloting, and the scaling fast is taking it to scale. And I totally agree with you. I'd like to see more of scaling fast and really big. I guess I'm wondering, how much is regulatory pushback really the hindrance, the hurdle, or is that an excuse? I often hear this when we talk about cloud, how things can't be done, and then really when you dig underneath it, when you scratch the surface, lots can be done. So how much of it truly is regulation and compliance that stops us from doing stuff?
I think it's only part of the equation. I think you nailed it right on the head. I believe that there are regulatory considerations anytime you're doing something new. It's a little bit more stringent than just sort of your legal review process outside of healthcare. But at the end of the day, there's not necessarily binary answers, i.e. you can't do this or you can do this. It's really more about shades of gray and what organizations are comfortable with. So that's one big part of it. The second part that I've seen a lot in our client environment that we've been speaking with is people don't necessarily want to do the test in their project, right? They're scared that it's going to have a negative impact, and so they won't get the credit for failing fast. They won't get the credit for trying to do something innovative. What they'll get that quote-unquote credit for is having sort of a negative experience, a negative outcome, etc. So I do believe that sort of our human nature is part of what holds us back pretty significantly with regards to even just the piloting, let alone scaling.
So I have to think, though, that's got to be the same we've seen with other new technologies, right? No one wants to be the guinea pig, the one cutting through all the crap as they innovate, but they do it, right? We get there. So what's gonna push those early adopters to take that risk and take that chance and go big? What do you think are some of the trends that are going to push towards that? I mean, looking like I said, more forward thinking than a few months.
Yeah, I mean, for me, technology is interesting. It's exciting. It gets people talking about where the world is headed. unless the technology is addressing a business challenge or there's a business mandate to utilize the technology, it will just be a kind of shiny object and or an art of the possible conversation. So I do think that a lot of industries, and mine, healthcare being one of them, is one where we are seeing an imperative to change. In a lot of different industries, we're seeing the competitive dynamic, we're seeing disruptions from different startups and other types of organizations. And as a result, I mean, companies are recognizing that if they're not starting to harness some of the opportunity here, they're going to either be disrupted, they're going to have a competitive disadvantage or what have you. So I think that to me is the key part of that. And just to get more specific on that, a lot of organizations think that at least in healthcare and life sciences and pharma, they've been doing quite well for a number of years. They make a lot of money in their products. And so why disrupt the current business model has been the mentality. And so, from my perspective, I think they're now starting to see the need for it because their model is being disrupted through policy and the regulatory environment. Everything that you see now with regards to pricing of pharmaceutical products, there's a lot of sort of spotlight on that. So I do believe that the societal, the regulatory, and sort of the business imperative are coming together to cause a need to do this, because ultimately there's good value to be driven out of this. There's opportunities for reducing costs. There's opportunities for better outcomes in the case of healthcare. And there's better opportunities to engage, with your customers. So at the highest level, I think that there's a lot of good reasons for it. We put aside those. We start to see now more more opportunities and more business imperative. We'll start to see more adoption.
I have a question for you. I'm here with one of our partners, and their CEO made all of them read the book by Jeffrey Moore about the zones. And I had to think about this because you talk about innovation. I haven't read the book, so I shouldn't go too deep, but he talks about innovation zones, and he talks about productivity zones, and he talks about performance zones, so how to keep performing businesses running in parallel with innovating businesses and so forth. And it reminds me very much of what you talked about, how this is very much of a cultural thing. How do I take the first step, a new path, lead on a path that hasn't been led before? So my question for you is twofold. One, here is, what do you think we do in Deloitte around this, and what do we do really well? And what do you take what other companies do really well when they want to change culture around having innovation being part of it?
Yeah. We spend a lot of time talking, I've spent a lot of time talking recently about, for lack of a better term, operating model with regards to digital broadly. And I think it's very interesting because there's no right answer, but there are some things that are not good to do, so to speak. And one of the things I think is a good example in Deloitte is this whole idea of scaling edges. We have a lot of focus on that, and how you at times need to take things that are disruptive and innovative and take them out of the core and put them on the edge and then scale and then build them and incubate them and then scale them. And I think we've got a couple of good examples of it. I think part of what we're doing within IoT is an example of that. I think we within our consulting organization, we have innovation organizations within that who are focused on exponentials broadly and thinking about how the impact and transformation of industries. So I think we've started to take pieces of it and then allow it to grow and incubate outside of the core of business, because the core will always pound all of the good sense, so to speak, out of this innovative thinking because of the metrics and the financial pressures that are put upon it. So I think for me that's one thing, and I think Deloitte has done has a couple of good examples of where we've done that. I do think with regards to other organizations, for me, I'll talk about digital broadly and IoT being part of that. For me, I think when companies are now thinking about, we need a corporate digital strategy, I sort of applaud that on one hand, but sometimes I feel like maybe, starting top down isn't the right thing for every organization. Wouldn't it be nice to build a capability in one thing and build success in one thing and then start to have a vision for what your corporate strategy is, but instead of, laying out an abstract concept, have it being built off of capabilities, initiatives, and successes that you've actually driven. And so I've seen some examples of clients doing that. But I've also seen the examples where the clients want to start top down, and I understand the need for both.
So I think that's spot on, Jonathan. In fact, we were just having a similar conversation on one of our accounts this week where the capabilities are growing very naturally within some of the business units and in very small scale. But at the same time, at a corporate level, they're trying to figure out how do all these pieces work together. How do you make sure there's not redundancies, of course, because you don't want to build all these capabilities in silos and then you've got all this duplicative effort. How do you learn best practices, all that? What you mentioned, what not to do. Is there anything that you would recommend when companies are looking at that balance, that struggle? What are some of the criteria? How do they think through that? How do they come up with the right answer? I know there's not like one fits all. I'm not delusional, but
I don't think there is, but I think there are a couple of things. So we talk with our clients, and I'm sure every single one of us has used terminology like fail fast. Like I don't know what the right language is, but failing is okay if we learn and we iterate and we pivot and all that, but not all organizations are really so good at it. So I think you really have to take a mirror to your face, so to speak, or to your organization and say, can we actually do this? Can we get sort of permission to fail, right? And not that we're going to fail. We might be greatly successful, but I think that is it takes some sort of emotional maturity, if you will, for lack of a better term, as an organization to really say, can we handle this? So I think if the time horizon for financial results is X versus Y, I mean that should be known, and that should be a factor for determining kind of which approach you should take. I also think that certain organizations do feel like they're so disparate and that they need some common pillars, right? And if they don't have those common pillars, then they just can't sort of get aligned, and they can't sort of realize the value. And they're also probably a little bit more mature in their capability. So I think the ones that have a little bit more maturity and that are built some of this initial capability, I think they sort of are good candidates for this sort of overarching strategy. I'm not sure. Those are just a couple of thoughts, though. I do think that there is no right and wrong answer. I think even within those sort of like build from the bottom up versus build from the top down, there's still the biggest question of, what are you trying to accomplish? Right? It comes back to the business imperative, and maybe that's also, one of the key inputs to deciding which way you go. If you're solving a particular business problem, do you really need that corporate level digital strategy, right? If your problem is that you're inefficient, you're ineffective, you're not building platforms, you're not scaling things, maybe there is that need to be more across the organization.
Super interesting conversation about making change happen from top down and bottom up. So thank you for that. If you're just joining us, I'm Robert Schmid, Deloitte Specialist Chief IoT Technologist, and you're watching Coffee with Mr. IoT. Today, Rachel and I are having Jonathan Fox on with us, and we're talking about the future of IoT, and that's really far out. Jonathan, I want to switch a little bit and ask you a totally different question. You spend a lot of time talking to people about strategy. Give me the most exciting strategy piece you've done lately with someone that really surprised you, something that was really out there that you could talk to us about here in this forum.
So what surprises me? That's a fundamental question. I think.
Let's remove any of the stupidity surprises. Let's leave those ones under.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
No. It's a good question. So one of the things that I'm not surprised by it, but one of the things that I'm often very encouraged by is to see the conversations that we have with clients move beyond sort of art of possible, move beyond even sort of pilot, and move to significant commitment. And I'm currently working with a client, and I would put this under the umbrella of digital very broadly, what they're doing. It's a lot of data, it's a lot of analytics, but it's also Internet of Things, et cetera. And they've made a big, bold bet, a big commitment to data and analytics, to sort of building capability around this to be a differentiated part of their organization. So for me, it's not surprising that people are doing these kind of things, but it's really refreshing to see such an organizational commitment to it and to see momentum around it. So that would be one thing.
Where did that start? Did that start at the top?
It did. It was very much a commitment that was started. I don't know that it was literally started via the CEO, but it was direct reports. The C-suite, and the commitment is now embedded. Within the leadership team. Absolutely.
Got it.
If
I interrupted you, you're going to go into your.
I'm trying to think of something that surprises me.
Let me give you an example. I have an example, and I want to see if you have something similar. I was with a bunch of CIOs and executives. We do these greenhouse sessions within Deloitte, as you know, where we bring people in and think outside the box. And one of them came up to me and said that he was part of a pilot where they used drones. And whenever I say drones, I almost have to smile because so many people say, well, you and your drones, right? But they used drones. They flew over an agricultural area, and they took video imagery of individual plants, and then based on the individual plant's condition on the video, made a pesticide plan.
Oh,
that was fascinating to me, and it was fascinating from two ways, because the person I talked to was actually someone who sells pesticides, and so his first reaction was, well, that's not good for business. My reaction was, how come? Because why couldn't we go and actually now sell the health of the plant rather than a pesticide?
Right.
And so it's really interesting because they could lower cost by having less pesticides and yet still make the same revenue by giving better plants. And it really talks to the opportunity for business model change. And I see this all the time in IoT, how it enables this. But all in all, it was a fascinating story, and I like to talk about it. And I haven't really gotten to the people who actually did it, but it's a great idea, and I love that. And it's really an interesting combo of video, IoT, and a change of business model.
Yeah. I don't know that I have a word. I love it. It's fascinating. Mike, I think in the space that I spend a lot of my time, we're really trying to get to that pilot phase. So I'm not as much so surprised. But I guess some of the things that I see as again, not a surprise, but sort of encouraging is where there are places where we're actually, moving beyond just sort of the discussion about things. I see, with regards to how patients are engaged in clinical trials and the use of IoT as something that's gaining tremendous momentum. I'm very encouraged by that. I'm surprised a little bit by some of the momentum I see in some of the client organizations, because others are really being challenged by it.
Yeah, some are scared out of their minds and don't even want to talk about it. Run the other way.
Right. You can't.
Why is it scary? Tell me about this. Talk about the scary part and maybe put some perspective on it.
Yeah, so Jonathan, maybe talk about the regulatory fear as well as the high cost of investment in that area, because I think it's something you and I are near and dear to, but may not be obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different aspects of this. First, I mean, a little bit of context. If we're talking about research and development in healthcare, organizations spending individually billions of dollars a year. This is where it comes down to this sentiment that I referred to earlier, sort of not on my trial. If I'm doing something really high profile that potentially is going to have billions of dollars of revenue for the organization in the future, do I want to play with technology that's not necessarily core to as they see it at least, to sort of the medical application of the treatment? And I would suggest that leading organizations now think about how the combination of the technology and the therapeutic could actually lead to better outcomes and could lead to a differentiated value proposition in the market post-launch. But that being said, the challenges are a couple. One, in our industry, the regulatory environment isn't always laid out for organizations, and they want very clear guidelines as to what can be done, how it needs to be done, how things are documented. And so when there's not 100% sort of quote-unquote clarity, or there's something new, usually the easy way to handle that is to just shut it down, right? You just say, you know what, we don't really know what the environment is exactly or how the FDA will respond, so let's just not do it, right? It's a risk, it's an unnecessary risk. So that's one sort of fear or challenge. Another is with regards to data, and we're all individuals and patients and consumers, and there's concerns about privacy with regards to our data. Now, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I remember when someone told me initially that I could transact with my bank online, I thought to myself, why would anyone ever, allow their personal finances to be online, right? And then all of a sudden, we can't live without it. And I think the same thing is kind of in healthcare right now. It's like, why would I want anyone to have potentially be able to hack into my sort of personal healthcare record, if you will? And it's not literally a personal healthcare record, but personal healthcare data. And I think that's a big concern. And then also, what do you do with that data and the security around it? So I think those are the regulatory and the data and the privacy are the main issues that all are concerns within this context of this highly costly environment with a lot at stake.
And I think going back to your first point, then the last concern is the being the first and failing, and then and then taking the hit for everyone else.
So we have a few more minutes left. Let's get out of failing and let's get personal. Or maybe I'll fail at being personal, who knows. I want to ask you a personal question. When you talk about this, we often talk about it abstract, and we don't talk, and so I like to take it back to how does it feel for me? And so for me, I'm actually okay. I'd be really curious. I'd be okay to share my Fitbit data, It'd be a little embarrassing at times for people to know that I don't work out enough, or, I'm always having some concerns about my weight. And there's some feelings about this associated with this. At the same token, if it helps my health, I'd be happy to share that. So I'm pretty open about privacy and what I would be willing to share. And I have found I'm somewhat different in that sense from many people in my age group, which is yet again different from my kids. I'm curious to ask you both, Rachel and Jonathan, this last question. Where do you draw the line personally in your life about sharing data, privacy, healthcare stuff, and so forth?
I think it's an interesting question. So I tend to be a more private person generally in terms of sharing, but it's funny. I couldn't find your Twitter profile. What's that?
I couldn't find your Twitter profile.
Exactly, but I often ask myself, why is that? I think, quite frankly, part of it is laziness. I love photography, and my wife always asks me, like, I don't understand, why are you not on Instagram? Like, you love photography, you like to look at it, you like to take pictures, so why don't you do that? And I have no good reason for it other than, I guess, laziness. So with regards to, like sharing, so that's one thing. With regards to sharing health information, I am not so concerned about, the information that comes off of my Fitbit or whatever the device is, to be honest. I'm more concerned conceptually with, are these organizations that, healthcare organizations well positioned or suited to manage that kind of data in, going forward. So, I mean, for me, that as a person, as an individual, I do have some concerns about that.
So I think it's funny when this question comes up, Robert, because if we look back, 10 years to paying for things on the internet, no one wanted to use their credit card online. Everyone was terrified that, it was going to get stolen. The same concerns, Jonathan, you just mentioned, the ability to take my private data that's so valuable, my financial records. Now we're switching it into the health records, and are these organizations able to do it? And if it's similar to the credit cards and online e-commerce, then yeah, there's going to be some pitfalls. Hey, they're still getting hacked. They're still stealing my stuff. I still get a notice from Macy's, our stuff's been hacked. Here's your credit report. But is it going to go that way? And is it scarier because it's our health? I personally am a big sharer, not through altruism. I don't really care about the greater good because I'm a selfish person, but about, if it's going to impact me to know more about my own health concerns, my own health issues, by having an aggregate norm to build off of and to build hypotheses from. I think from a selfish perspective, absolutely, bring it on. Data's where it gets exciting. And the more we can share, I think the better educated we can, the better we can drive things like R&D, as Jonathan was talking about, and really find some innovative ways to treat people that we haven't had a chance up until now. And that's the most fascinating part about this to me, and where I just get so excited that why aren't we doing it right now? Because it's right in front of us. But my 2 cents.
Well, I appreciate it. I hope that, Jonathan, you overcome your laziness and you will get an Instagram account so I can see. I talk about photography sharing laziness because obviously nothing else what I was referring to. Please, sorry for my correction there. I just want to see your photos. So I'm looking forward to that. And thank you for Rachel for not being only a great co-host but also being so open with your data. I feel the same way. So thanks for that. Looks like we're coming to an end with Coffee with Mr. IoT. I want to thank Jonathan for a great conversation. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. It was fun.
Please join Rachel and me again next Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, for another Coffee with Mr. IoT. And by the way, if you missed any part of today's conversation, you can watch us again, any past episodes or today's episodes on my YouTube channel. With that, bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.